I want to thank the Attorney-General, the Honourable Tony Booty, for his announcement prior to the winter recess that he would be developing a legislative remedy to address the findings of the High Court in the case of Bird versus DP. A survivor, known as DP, was sexually abused by a priest of the Ballarat Roman Catholic Diocese in the 1970s. And the question that the High Court needed to consider was whether the diocese could be held vicariously liable for the abuse committed by that priest, despite the priest not being formally employed by the diocese. The High Court found that the principles of vicarious liability are confined to employment relationships. And this decision, of course, has far-reaching implications for the survivors of child sex abuse to hold institutions to account for the abuse that was perpetrated against them and that occurred under the care of those institutions. Abuse that we know was often known by those in leadership in many instances, who chose instead to hide or move priests who were known to be perpetrators rather than hold them to account. And the fact that the case was even before the High Court is yet another demonstration of how the Catholic Church in particular has invested a great deal of money, a great deal of time and a great deal of moral energy in avoiding its responsibility to children abused by their priests, their nuns and their brothers. The decision that they actively sought meant that the Church could continue to evade their responsibility. Responsibility, I'm sure we can all agree, has not just a legal definition, but a moral and an ethical one as well. The Western Australian Department of Justice has been tasked with developing options, including the introduction of legislation to address the implications of the Bird versus DP decision. And this movement will build on other reforms delivered by the Labor government to survivors of child sex abuse. In 2017, the WA Labor government introduced historic reforms to remove obstacles to victim survivors of child sex abuse. These reforms removed the limitation periods for civil actions. And I want to acknowledge and thank the previous Attorney General, the Honourable John Quigley, for this most significant of reforms. And it is one that I know that he is rightfully immensely proud of, for that reform changed people's lives. The reforms also fixed a loophole by providing a legal basis for suing institutions such as churches for historical child sex abuse in the name of the current office holders. And I would say that on the committee inquiry that I was a part of last year, the Community Development Justice Committee's inquiry into how Western Australia had responded to the Royal Commission into Institutional Child Sex Abuse, we determined to no longer use the term historical child sex abuse and made a recommendation to the government that this language be altered in all of our formal communications. And I quote from the report, "It is very clear that the term historical does a disservice to the victims of abuse. The impacts of abuse continue to be present for the victims, but also for their extended families and friends, whether that abuse occurred yesterday or 50 years ago. Worryingly, it is very clear that the abuse of children continues in a range of organisations. The Royal Commission shed light on this previously largely hidden topic, and that exposure led to some positive changes and reduced opportunities for institutional abuse of children. However, abuse continues." And further, we know that the impact is not historical. The impact is experienced in the present. So I want to thank again the survivors and the organisations who work alongside them, in particular SOCA, Survivors of Child Abuse, Chewett Place and No More Legal. And I thank the Honourable Dave Kelly, who has been and remains a passionate advocate for survivors, as well as those committee members from the previous Parliament, Dr David Honey, Christine Tonkin and Mark Folkard. It was an honour to do that work with them alongside survivors.